I'm a nutritionist, which I'll speak more about in a bit. And today we'll talk about energy levels. So energy levels, how to improve your energy levels if you have low energy levels, what the mechanisms are involved in energy levels. The good news is I haven't rehearsed this one at all yet, so I haven't tested this on anyone, so if this is technical at all, please just wave and I will explain it as I best can because I'll get into some technical stuff here. Just let me know and I'll explain exactly what that is. Okay, so brief introduction. So I am a nutritionist registered with Bantam CNHC. They are the main, sorry that's a bit small. They are the main regulatory bodies for nutritionists in the UK. I practice functional medicine, which is essentially root cause medicine. It's individual-centered, it's not disease-centric. So two people with the same diagnosed condition may have got there by very different routes, and I'm looking at unraveling that and tackling the root cause. And I do that with nutrition, movement, supplementation, stress management, and sleep. So fatigue is probably the most common complaint I have with my clients. And there's a reason for that. So fatigue is sort of one of two master indicators of something being out of balance in the body. The other one would be pain. So if you have fatigue, as in constantly have fatigue, not just a bit tired, that's a sign. Or if your energy levels are low, that's a sign something might be out of whack in your body that you want to address. So we're going to look at three systems today. The three main systems of how you produce energy, and then the three main systems of what you would need to look at for energy, and obviously there are exceptions to this, but this is mainly what you would look at. Okay, so the first one is your metabolism. So what do I mean by metabolism? Metabolism is how you utilize energy. So you consume food, which is fuel. You then have to turn that food into energy. How efficient that system is determines how you make energy. So I've said that there. You've probably colloquially heard about people talking about faster metabolisms or slower metabolisms. This is literally how much energy you burn in a day. So yeah, we use, generally speaking, when it comes to metabolism, we use fuel to make energy. The fuels we use are carbohydrates, which we break down into glucose, or fats. So both of these can be broken down to energy in our cell. We don't use protein for energy, but protein can be converted into carbohydrate. So yeah, I said that. Well, we can make both glucose and fat in our body and use that for energy. So if we don't have food, we can still make energy. And the two things that determine how we make energy or how we metabolize energy is the ability to get fuel into a cell so the cell can use the energy. And then once the fuel is in the cell, the ability for that cell to turn the fuel into energy. Does that make sense? Okay, so you have to, it's like a car. If you imagine a car, you have to put fuel in the car, but then the car's engine has to be working to convert that fuel into energy. Okay, so the first thing we'll focus on is getting the fuel into the cells. How does the body get fuel into the cells so the cells of your body can then convert that energy, that fuel into energy? So we'll focus on glucose because fat metabolism is a bit more complicated. So glucose, it's broken down from carbohydrate. Glucose travels around our body in our blood. Okay, our cells don't have access to that glucose. Our cells, every single cell in your body is surrounded by a layer of fat called a phospholipid bilayer. That's how the cell protects itself and controls its environment. Okay, so fuel can't get into cells. What has to happen is there has to be a signal to that cell that allows the cell to then let glucose in. And that is done from a hormone known as insulin. So insulin is produced in our pancreas. It's produced in response to rises in blood glucose. Then we make insulin. Insulin travels around our body, through our blood, attaches to cells, and that signal from insulin tells the cell to open up a gate in its cell wall and let the glucose in. Does that make sense? Okay. So essentially you eat, your blood glucose goes up, you make insulin, and then the cell lets in the glucose. I think this is why I describe here. Okay, and this is what it looks like. Ooh. So this is what happens normally. As I said, pancreas, that's the pancreas. A bad picture of pancreas over. It makes insulin. It attaches to an insulin receptor, and that lets glucose into the cell. Okay, so when that's working normally, that's how you get fuel into a cell. Okay, so problems with this system occur if you have chronically elevated levels of insulin in your body. Okay, so if your insulin levels are chronically elevated, what happens there is the cells stop listening to the signal from insulin. It's like insulin is shouting and the cells stop listening. And that is actually sort of the number one rule for any hormone, is prolonged high physiological exposure to any hormone results in reduced cell sensitivity to that hormone. Okay, which literally means the hormone is screaming, because hormones are signals, they give signals to cell. The hormone is screaming and the cell's just not listening. And the cell does that by reducing receptors on its surface, and that's actually a defense mechanism, because the cell can be, too much glucose is toxic to the cell. Okay, so it would reduce sensitivity to the cell. So this is called, when this happens, this is called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, which is extremely common in post-industrial societies like the UK, Europe, or America. Prolonged exposure to high insulin reduces cell sensitivity to insulin, and then you can't get glucose into the cell. So that is what insulin resistance. And obviously, the end stage of insulin resistance is type 2 diabetes, but that's quite extreme. Most people don't get there, but all of us are exposed to various levels of insulin resistance through our lives. So yeah, I've discussed that. So with insulin resistance, if you have difficulty getting glucose into cells, it will result in impaired energy production. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So insulin resistance is not a disease. It's a sliding scale that everyone exists on. A poor night's sleep or increased stress or a day of binge eating will increase your insulin resistance, but obviously you can correct that depending on what happens the next day. Okay. Yeah, so issues happen when we're in a state of chronic insulin resistance. When we're in a state of chronic insulin resistance, that's where things go. That's when things start to go wrong, and really, the main things that cause insulin resistance really is excessive calorie intake, especially from refined foods. So excessive calorie intake, refined foods will massively spike insulin, and then not using the glucose that's in your blood, so being sedentary. So basically the things that affect most people in Western society. So what can you do to improve insulin sensitivity? So the number one thing you can do is to get stronger. So 80% of your glucose is stored in your muscle cells. If you increase your lean mass, so you increase lean tissue, you literally increase your gas tank or your capacity to store glucose. And the same, so even if you don't increase lean tissue, if your cell gets stronger, that cell is more metabolically active and requires more fuel to run. So that cell is hungry for glucose. So if you can get stronger or increase lean tissue, which I'm sure you all do here, that literally increases your capacity to take on glucose and automatically increases your insulin sensitivity. Does that make sense?
And lean tissue, you mean muscle?
Yes, I mean muscle, but actually mostly muscle, but it's not actually. I mean, it's bone as well, and then it can be there's stuff called Sarcoplasmic Reticulum, which is actually, it's the fluid transport system within your muscle. So when you exercise and you get that feeling of a pump, that's actually what you're expanding when you do that. So it's a lot of things. So it's not just muscle tissue, but yes, mostly.
Sorry, did you say bone?
Yes, bone as well. Yeah, you actually increase bone density if you do resistance training. Yeah, so you can actually reverse osteopenia with doing resistance training, which is pretty cool. So yeah, okay. So that's the main would be the main intervention for decreasing your risk of insulin resistance. Moving more in the day, as I said, this is a condition that's caused by being too sedentary and eating too much. And that would just be walking, moving around, doing your gardening, DIY, whatever it is. A high protein diet, and one of the reasons for that would be you're very, very bad at making energy from protein. You make energy from fat and carbohydrate very well. Even if you had adequate calories and you only had protein, you would eventually die of starvation. So protein is also extremely satiating, so you're probably more likely to eat less if you prioritize protein with each meal. Okay, and then also attaining healthy body fat levels, which is obviously related to insulin resistance. And I didn't say losing weight for a very good reason, because obviously increasing lean tissue would mean you gain weight. And healthy body fat levels there's a wide range of what's a healthy body fat level. It's about 10 to 20% for a man, and about 18 to 33% for a woman. Okay. Everyone happy with that? Okay. So, yeah. So please just say if it's complex or you don't. Okay. So that's how you get fuel into a cell. Again, this is part of metabolism. This is all under metabolism. But once the fuel's in the cell, you have to then be able to use the fuel efficiently. The cell has to be able to use the fuel efficiently. Okay. So once it's in the cell, there are these things in a cell called mitochondria. They are literally the powerhouses of your body. How well your mitochondria function determines how much energy you can make, okay, from the fuel that's in the cell. The powerhouse of the cell. And there are actually whole theories of disease that are based around mitochondrial function. There are people now who are hypothesizing that mitochondrial dysfunction leads to cancer, metabolic disease, immune dysfunction, anything you name it, because if the mitochondria isn't working properly, that cell will malfunction, whether it's an immune cell or a liver cell or whatever it is. Okay, so that's a mitochondria, that sausage-shaped thing there. Oh, let's keep one. I keep forgetting to look at this slide on the big screen. So that's a closer one. And how you make energy is so this lives in your cell. It's actually a bacteria, by the way. That's actually an ancient bacteria that at some point in time cells learn to have a symbiotic relationship with. And when you take antibiotics, it reduces your levels of the mitochondria, just as an aside. But so this membrane, there's an electron transport reaction that goes across the membrane, and that is literally how you make energy. And the reaction looks like this, which you have to remember. Yeah. Obviously not. This is the citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle, which is literally the reaction that takes place in your mitochondria. And I tried to get one the only reason I have this diagram is to show you all these reactions that happen in the mitochondria require these B. It says B. This is riboflavin. It's a B vitamin. This is niacin. It's a B vitamin. These are B vitamins, thiamine and riboflavin. All these reactions require vitamins. And I wanted to get a better one because there's also minerals required in these reactions: zinc, magnesium, iron. And so the purpose of showing you this is actually what you eat has a massive impact on how well you make energy in your mitochondria. So how to optimize your mitochondrial function. So, to be honest, it's extremely closely related to insulin resistance. If you are insulin resistant, you reduce your mitochondria because you have too much glucose in your cell generally, and that's toxic to the cell. So most of the interventions are the same. Insulin resistance, less mitochondrial density, and if you're insulin sensitive, you increase your mitochondrial density. So again, same stuff, eat a nutrient dense. So nutrients, as I said before, if you eat, say, a donut, right, lots of calories, no nutrition. Okay, so you're giving your cells lots of calories, but they don't have the B vitamins and everything that you need to make those reactions to make energy. And that's might be why if you ate loads of donuts all the time, you start to feel a bit crap. So you don't have the necessary substrates to process that energy. And the reason you improve gut health is because this is actually quite a big piece which I work with a lot of my clients is if you're not absorbing what you eat, if you can't absorb the B vitamins and all the minerals and everything like that, then you're not going to be able to use them. So you have to absorb them first. There's what you eat, and then there's what you absorb. Increase lean tissue. So if you get stronger, one of the things that happens when I said your cell gets hungrier, you literally make more mitochondria in that cell. That's actually what happens. And then obtain healthy body fat that's related to insulin resistance, and move frequently low intensity. Things like walking, especially, the general recommendation 10,000 steps a day is a good one. That seems to optimize your mitochondrial function. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was metabolism.
So you said something about if you take lots of antibiotics, it kills it.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
So are those the things that regenerate it?
They can regenerate, yes. They regenerate. So again, these are not diseases or disease states. These are things that fluctuate. So insulin sensitivity and mitochondrial function, you have quite a great degree of control of how you function. So yeah, I mean, antibiotics do a lot of things. They sort of nuke your gut microbiome as well. Obviously, sometimes antibiotics are life-saving. So in those instances, the risks are definitely worth it. But they're not something you want to take regularly and chronically, because they do damage the system.
But if you take a probiotic, doesn't that?
It helps actually, yes. And it also makes the antibiotics more effective. Yeah, so it helps. But your gut is perfectly capable of, unless you've had appendicitis, but even then, it doesn't seem to really matter. But the appendix, when you kill everything in your gut, your appendix contains remnants of the culture that you already had in there. So when you get rid of everything, what's left in your appendix actually repopulates your entire gut. So if you had a healthy diet, lifestyle before, you take a load of antibiotics, and then you go straight back to that, it will repopulate exactly the same as it was before. So yeah.
Is there any indication how many mitochondria you have per cell, or have some cells got more than others?
Yes, it varies per cell. Mm-hmm. So things like it's very, very dense in your heart cells, for instance. Okay. Your heart muscle is extremely dense. I don't know, organ meats are very popular to eat, but if anyone's ever eaten heart, you actually get all the basic nutrients to form those mitochondria. CoQ10 would be something that's very rich in heart, which is used in the electron transport chain to make energy. Muscle cells are dense as well, and then things like intestinal cells tend to be less dense. I don't know exactly how many in each cell though. I suspect it's in the order of hundreds in each cell. So, okay. So thyroid function. So that's the second of all the three things that I'm going to talk about that makes energy. So your thyroid is here. It's sort of 2 teaspoon sizes just there. You can see it if you look in the mirror and swallow. What it does, it takes iodine, the mineral iodine, and it makes thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormone is T4. The body then converts thyroid hormone into a usable form of thyroid hormone called T3. And that is what our cells recognize. T3 tells cells to metabolize. Okay? So without that signal from thyroid hormone, the cells don't metabolize. And eventually they would die, actually. Every cell in your body has a receptor for thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormone is extremely important. It determines your metabolism, essentially. So it literally tells the cell to work. It determines the speed of the cell's metabolism. So people who have impaired thyroid function, which is extremely common, congenital or through autoimmunity, if you don't have medication, you will definitely feel extremely fatigued. And if you don't have a thyroid and you don't take medication, you'll eventually die. So it's essential. And that's where the thyroid gland sits. I'll just show you, there's another diagram there of the thyroid gland. You've also got your parathyroid glands here. They regulate calcium in your body, so it's actually very important, even though it's a very small organ. Okay, so factors that can affect your thyroid function. And this is assuming you have a thyroid and you don't have autoimmunity that's affecting your thyroid function. So iodine. So as thyroid hormone is just made from iodine, your iodine intake will determine your thyroid function. And it used to be in places in America, in the Midwest, and also in Central Africa, where they were far away from the coast. So iodine, we find it in seafood generally. And soil that even grows food that's close to the coast will actually have a decent amount of iodine in it. Very landlocked countries will be very low in iodine. So people used to get these goiters, people would have these massive necks, swellings in their necks in Central America and Central Africa as well, until people worked out that this was because of iodine deficiency. So if you supplement with iodine, you can actually reverse that. There's still actually a decent, I see in my clients quite a lot of iodine deficiency. I mean, seafood, people don't eat much seafood generally. And it can be a reason for congenital hypothyroidism today. Often, particularly in women, particularly if you've had children. So when you and you breastfed the children. So when you iodine is a critical component of breast milk. If children don't get iodine, if children are iodine deficient, they get something called cretinism, which basically means they have very low IQs and they're not able to function normally. And because of that, if you are lowish in iodine but able to function as a woman, and then you have a baby and you breastfeed, your body will prioritize giving that baby the iodine. And then you won't notice until later in life, maybe in your 50s and 60s, you become iodine deficient and then you get a hypothyroid. So I see that as very common.
So I got mine 6 months after I had mine.
Sorry?
I got hypothyroid or diagnosed with it just 6 months after.
Yeah. So was that? Did you know the reason for that, or did you know the cause?
It's my mum's got it, but
very interesting.
Yeah, and I've got twin sisters, so she's got it.
Eat some seafood.
Pardon?
Eat some seafood.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one factor affecting your thyroid function. Stress is another factor affecting your thyroid function. So we've evolved this mechanism as a defense mechanism. It's basically one of the major stresses in the environment we evolved in was famine. And if you're in a famine, you don't want to have a metabolism that's very fast. You want to have a very slow metabolism. So we developed a mechanism whereby instead of converting thyroid hormone T4 into T3, we convert it into something called reverse T3, which sits in the thyroid hormone receptor on a cell and stops the active T3 getting to that cell. So it literally slows your metabolism, which is great if you're in a famine, but not great if you're trying to improve your energy. So some people are highly susceptible to this, and anyone who is on thyroid medication, most people on T4 only thyroid medication, they do very well. About 20% of people I find are very susceptible converting that T4 to T3, and if they take more but T4, they will just feel worse because they're just making more and more and more reverse T3. So stress is a massive factor affecting thyroid function. Okay, so your gut function. So there is a link that we don't fully understand, like a lot of things about the gut, between your gut and your thyroid. And one obvious one is that it will inhibit your absorption of iodine if your gut is off. But there seems to be a bit more complex than that. We know there's certain infections that you can get in your stomach, like H. pylori, which causes gastritis. That can cause hypothyroid, and we don't understand why. And if your gut's imbalanced, you're more likely to develop an autoimmunity like like Hashimoto's, which causes hypothyroidism. Okay. Yeah, I could talk about that forever. That's probably like 50% of my job. Okay, so most thyroid, even autoimmunity would be reversed. If you have problems with your thyroid, I found most is reversible. If you still have a thyroid, if you don't have a thyroid, obviously you're going to be taking thyroid hormone. The things you want to pay attention to is make sure you have seafood in your diet. Kelp is actually if you eat Japanese food, the seafood in that's the highest concentration of iodine you can get. Stress management. And then you've got health. Does that all make sense? Okay. So stress hormone function, this is the third of the three things that I talked about today that will affect your energy levels. So our stress hormone is known as cortisol. Cortisol is essentially your get up and go. Cortisol, let's get this up here. So it's secreted from your adrenal glands, and again, it's like thyroid hormone, like insulin. It is another hormone, okay, and it works in a daily rhythm. Cortisol starts to rise. Yeah, so we increase cortisol production when we're stressed. So when we're stressed, it's like we're pumping the gas and we produce more cortisol. Cortisol actually makes you feel very good because it's a stress hormone. It's sort of got a bad rap, but actually it makes you feel very good. If I injected you with cortisol, you'd actually feel great. It's anti-inflammatory, gives you energy. When you drink coffee, if you're a coffee drinker and you like coffee, that is cortisol that you're feeling. That the good feeling of, you know, I feel positive and, you know, ambitious and everything like that. That's actually cortisol, and it's what wakes us up in the morning. And where I see problems with cortisol is essentially if you've been calling on its resources too hard for too long. That's when things can be coming out of whack, and that's when you can get problems with energy production. So yeah, if you as a good example, I think I say it here. Yeah, so if you were going to bed at say 1 in the morning, and you were getting up at 5 in the morning, and you were doing HIIT workouts, and then you were going for a run, you'd probably get by for a few weeks, or a week, doing that. But eventually, you would start to feel really, really lousy. And that would be because if the cortisol is too high for too long, like insulin, when I discussed before, your cells start to become resistant to the effect of cortisol. Cortisol is telling the cells to make energy and do stuff. If they're resistant to that, then you're going to start to feel very tired.
On the second bullet point, you said cortisol works on a daily rhythm.
Yes, let me go back. Sorry. Trying to go back here. Come on. Let's do this. Okay.
How would that tie in with our experience of jet lag? If you move back from one time to
absolutely brilliant question. Absolutely brilliant question. Now I will answer that with the next slide.
Okay.
So this is your daily rhythm. Okay. So at 3 in the morning, not that you know at that time, your cortisol starts to rise slowly, peaking around 6, and that is literally why you wake up in the morning. That is what wakes you up. It then falls. This is a healthy cortisol. Obviously, it then falls throughout the day. It's nice and low, and your melatonin, which is your sleep hormone, will be high at around 9 or 10. That's what puts you to sleep. Okay, so let's say you go to a different time zone. Well, you can just change the time on this, and you can see that if this all of a sudden, if you go east, and this is now, I'm trying to think what the time zone would be. East is ahead, isn't it? So you'd be going that way, and this was now your night time. You're going to be wide awake. Okay? So yes, it's a great question, and it illustrates the points very well. If you stay in, say, Japan, obviously this cortisol starts to adjust over time, when it takes a week or whatever it is, it's an hour a day. Exactly. So that's exactly what it is. So with cortisol, as I was talking about stress and how that can affect your cortisol. So I see this, I can do a test which tests your cortisol throughout the day. That's what these black dots are. And what I will see, if someone's had an acute period of stress, so the most common ones, work, relationships, something like that, and they've been doing this for a few months, I see their cortisol will just be like this. And these people feel wired, they feel tired but wired, and they can't get to sleep at night. If I see someone who's been going through a prolonged period of stress, maybe they've been suffering stress for years or decades, I tend to see their cortisol down here like this. Okay, and that is less easy to understand. People say adrenal fatigue, that's not really what's happening. I think HPA axis dysfunction, which is hypothalamus pituitary adrenal dysfunction, is now how people describe it. There's a miscommunication between the system that keeps your hormones optimized. Anyway, the good news is both of those can be recovered, but it's quite tricky. And it's tricky. It can take time to normalize, because if your cortisol is out of whack, that is inherently stressful to your body, and it's telling your body to make more cortisol. So that's the problem. And actually, if your cortisol's out of whack, you're going to have more anxious thoughts. You're going to have probably mental health stuff going on. So you actually have to you have to change your relationship with your mind, and tools like meditation and stuff like that, understanding that your mind is always going to produce thoughts, and they're not real, they're just thoughts, that sort of thing. But it can take time. And if you can do that for a consistent period of time, you can normalise your cortisol. So, following interventions are tried and true, but they do require a consistency. So meditation, which really is learning, the thoughts always come. They're not real, they always come, you don't control them. And that way you can step back from them and not get involved with the thoughts. Sleep hygiene. Cold water hydrotherapy is really good. If anyone has tried that.
Moving on.
Yeah. What about sauna? Saunas, yeah. Sauna's good as well. Honestly though, cold water hydrotherapy is extremely good.
What about steam?
Yes, so it would be the same as sauna.
Yeah.
Strength training, again, but very specific strength training. I would say 1 to 5 reps, 3 minute to 5 minute breaks, and then another 1 to 5 reps. So low level, you're focusing purely on strength. Nutrient-dense, whole food, protein-centric diet. Again, if you're under stress, you don't want your diet to be a stress. Cardio and HIIT. So this is a big, yeah. If this is you, if your cortisol is out of whack, cardio and HIIT it's like petrol on a fire. And that's really difficult for people with cortisol dysregulation to understand, because they'll feel tired and they'll do HIIT and they'll feel good. And that's because they're resistant to cortisol. HIIT gives them a kick up in cortisol and they feel normal all of a sudden. Okay, but actually that is, all you're doing is fueling, fanning the flames.
It's like a drug habit.
Sorry?
Like a drug habit.
Yes it is, yeah. And walking should be the cardio essentially. Okay, so it's over now. The presentation's over. The elephant in the room is sleep. I haven't addressed sleep here, and all of you will know that if you sleep badly, your energy is shot, and obviously that can be cumulative over time. And the reason I haven't addressed it is because I'm meant to come back in March. Okay, and that is, so hopefully I'll see you there. And that's everything. I hope you guys have got lots of questions on this, or anything actually. I'm happy to answer any questions on this. And these are my contact details. I've run out of cards, unfortunately. And I've just started Instagram. It's a desperate marketing attempt. This is a double underscore if you want to follow me. So
We can email around the details as well.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Will we get access to this presentation? So anybody can.
I think
Yes,
I will
images
send
and-
the presentation, and so you can have the presentation. That's fine. So you can have all the slides. That's not a problem. Yeah, absolutely.
10 minutes because I don't want phone calls.
No problem at all. I will. I'll forward it in, and then I'll give it to you.
Yeah, we'll send it.
Cool.
Your name isn't on that.
Dorian.
Sorry.
He's called Simon Hunt.
Sorry.
Mr. Simon Hunt.
That's it is. Yeah, Mr. Help. Dorian. Dorian.
Is that your first name?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Dorian.
Yeah.
So, and how do you test for cortisol? Is it
You can
blood
do a
test?
saliva test.
Oh, saliva.
Yeah, so hormones are quite, saliva and urine are actually really good hormone tests because they tell you what's going on at the time. Blood tests are not so good for hormones actually. Blood tests are very useful for some things, limited for others. They just tell you what's in your blood. Your blood is just what's being transported around your body. It's not telling you how something works. So you do it's called a Dutch test, and you have 4 strips, and then you take it, just put it on your tongue, and then you dry it at certain times of the day, and then you send that back to the lab. So yeah, and you can do your cortisol rhythm.
What's your view on supplements on turmeric and magnesium?
Yeah, I didn't cover supplements, and there's a reason for that, because supplements can be so individual, and in all honesty, there's no silver bullet. The lifestyle and diet stuff should be 80-90% of the priority. But I mean, I use supplements in most of my clients, and they can be a big help, especially if you're deficient in something, or but I could like B vitamins for mitochondria. Creatine is awesome for mitochondria. Everyone should be on creatine. If you guys want to buy a supplement, that would be my one blanket recommendation.
Creatine, so what's in that then?
Just creatine. So yeah.
Is it a B vitamin then?
No, creatine is naturally found in meat.
How do you spell it?
Creatine. So it's naturally found in meat. It's completely natural, but it basically increases your mitochondrial density. It's good for it's food for your mitochondria effectively. It actually increases your cognition as well. It used to be, in the 90s, it was sold as a purely bodybuilding supplement. Now people are recognizing it as a wellness supplement, really, because it has so much utility in the body. I think everyone, there's about 5% of people get gastric distress, 5% of people. Apart from those people, almost everyone benefits from taking creatine.
So Dorian, I thought I'd heard that if you take it constantly,
Yeah.
it can stop producing it. Is that
That's
what it is?
yeah. It's the most well studied, like we've got so many studies on this stuff now, so you can take it every day, forever. And I would recommend you do actually, as long as you're not one of the ones that gets gastric distress.
Yeah.
It's such a good supplement, so yeah. There's very few that I would recommend to everyone except for that one.
And it helps with muscle growth, because it's
Sorry?
rugby players when they were professional.
Yeah.
Taking it like nothing.
Yeah, no, it does. It helps muscle growth, but it does a lot of other stuff as well, so yeah, that's great.
So can you
Dorian,
have
what-
too much creatine then?
No, you're just weirded out. But I mean, 5 grams a
I
day.
had a blood test, they said you've got too much.
That's creatinine. So that's your kidney function. So that's interesting that you had. That's a sign of muscle breakdown in your kidney generally. So a elevated creatinine can be a sign of stress. I don't know what was happening at the time. It can be a sign of elevated muscle breakdown basically. But it's a really bad marker. For they shouldn't really be reading anything into that. There's no impact on your metabolic health, no really good information on your kidney health. So I just wouldn't pay too much attention to that.
So Dorian, what do you do? One of us turns up in front of you, knock, hello Dorian.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Okay. You can have a 20-minute free consultation. That's the first thing. But my first consultation lasts an hour. And in that hour, the first half would be, usually I will send you a health questionnaire beforehand. It's quite detailed of your health history. And in the consultation, the first half is basically me asking you questions. I'm trying to find out, you will tell me what your goals are. You will tell me what you're bothered about, right? And I'm trying to find out what's going on, what might be keeping you from goals, why you might have certain symptoms, or what you might want to optimize. And in the second half of the consultation, I will tell you what I think is going on, which I don't know. I'm hypothesizing based on my knowledge and on my clinical experience. And if it's important we find out what's going on, I can suggest tests. Might not be important. Tests aren't always necessary. Then I would definitely give you nutritional advice, supplementary advice, and diet and lifestyle stuff. And then usually people go away and I see them in 6 to 8 weeks, by which time the tests would be available, and we get more specific in what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
What do you mean by gut distress?
Gut distress?
Yeah.
With the creatine.
Oh, gut distress. Oh, you'd have a tummy ache. Yeah, you just get a tummy ache. That's it.
Okay.
Or you might get a bit of diarrhea, that sort of thing. So yeah.
But if you haven't got an appendix, you can sort your gut out. You said you needed.
Absolutely, you can. Yeah.
If you haven't got one.
Yeah, it actually, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is theories, because it's amazing how much we don't know. So we think the appendix is so the appendix, we don't use it. It's basically an ancient cecum. We think that that's what happens when you repopulate the gut, but what we see in studies is that it takes people who don't have an appendix slightly longer to repopulate their gut after an infection, but they still do repopulate their gut, and it looks the same. So, and when I say slightly longer, the studies I've seen is 1 to 2 days. So you're talking, one people repopulate their gut within a week, and then you're 8 or 9 days.
I was interested that you didn't touch the alcohol effects on this.
That's obvious,
That's
isn't
the
it?
end.
That's obvious.
It always makes me feel better.
Yeah. I'll give you, so there's a supplement in America, right? This is really bad advice, I'm not sure I'm giving it to you. There's a supplement in America called Zebiotics, okay? And these guys have invented a probiotic that breaks down aldehyde, which is the stuff that gives you a hangover, okay? And you can go drinking, you can take Zebiotics, I I don't think you can get it here. You'd have to get it shipped in, and you will not have a hangover the next day, as long as you sleep okay. I mean, if you have a normal night's sleep, then so yeah.
So, Dorian, when I have a couple of drinks, I've got one of these heart monitor things.
Yeah.
And my average heart rate overnight is 10 or 15 beats
Yeah,
higher
that's good, yeah.
if I've had a couple of drinks.
Yeah, yeah. Does it your HRV or just your heart rate it's taking?
It's heart rate.
Heart rate, yeah. No, absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, one of the major problems with alcohol reduces your quality of sleep. So if it's significant, you don't really go into deep sleep. So you don't have the like restorative sleep that you would. And that's one reason why you feel so crap. The other reason is aldehyde, which is a byproduct of, so you have two phases of detoxification in your liver, phase 1, phase 2. Alcohol has to go through both of them to get through your body. When it goes through phase 1, it gets converted into something called aldehyde, which is actually, that's what makes you feel crap. It's not alcohol that makes you feel crap, it's aldehyde. And aldehyde then has to go through phase 2. And it's really interesting because we all have really different rates of phase 1 or phase 2 detoxification. And this is actually determines how well you do on alcohol, whether you get really bad hangovers. So, you know, just to give you an example, caffeine, in some people, at one extreme end, it detoxifies from your body in 2 hours. At the other end of the scale, it's 36 hours. So if you're one of the 2-hour people, you can probably have a coffee after dinner and still go to sleep fine. If you're one of the 36-hour people, you know, you're having a coffee in the morning and you can't sleep that night. So there's a massive like genetic variance, and that applies to alcohol as well. So yeah, you can actually find that out quite easily from if you've done a 23andMe genetic test. You can actually see how fast to detoxify you are. It's really interesting because, just to give an anecdote here, right, I'm a really fast phase 1 detoxifier. So I do really well with caffeine because caffeine only goes through phase 1. And I'm a really slow phase 2 detoxifier. So I don't do very well with alcohol. When I'm drinking, I always find I'm having a good time, and then I start to feel crap really quickly. And that's because my fast phase 1 is making aldehyde like crazy, and I'm not getting rid of it on the back end. So, yeah.
So Dorian, like longer term stuff aside, obviously
Yeah.
these are sort of lifestyle changes, it's, you know, putting all these things into practice.
Yeah.
For the like less patient amongst us,
Yeah.
who wake up on one day feeling a little bit
Yeah.
groggy, are
Yeah.
there sort of like quick fix things you can do to make you feel better on any given day?
Sure, yeah. You're not going to like them. The cold water.
Cold
Cold water,
water.
yeah. Cold water. Cold shower is great, and actually caffeine. So caffeine is the best ergogenic supplement there is.
a cold water shower so good?
It completely. There's this thing called a mammalian dive reflex. Okay, when you hit, you get that. That's mammalian dive reflex.
Do you think you're going to die?
It completely changes. So your neurotransmitters are also signaling molecules in your body, but they work faster than hormones because they go along your nerves. So adrenaline, for instance, is a neurotransmitter. Dopamine, serotonin, these are neurotransmitters. If you go under a cold shower, it completely resets them. So, and interesting because you mentioned that your heart rate, for example, if you want to run the experiment, probably none of you will. You can take your heart rate, go in a whole cold shower, and your heart rate will be 10 beats slower after you've had the cold shower, even if it's 30-second cold shower. Yeah. So yeah, it's really has.
Do your head.
Yeah.
Or your hand.
Actually, you joke, but splashing water in your face
Yeah.
has some of the same effect as that you would get from
I
the
have
whole.
been trying it at the end of my shower.
Yeah, that's how you start.
Like
That's
at
how
the
you
very
start.
end, I
Yeah.
just be under it for like
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah.
That is how you start, and then you
And it
build
just
up.
really makes
Yeah.
a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I hate them, but I do them every day now because I like the feeling afterwards so much.
So how long do you
I just have a shower, like a normal shower.
But can we like build up the
Yeah. No, the way that you do it when you do at the end, that's how everyone starts, and that's fine actually, just doing 30 seconds at the end. But then cold bath, and that's even another thing, that's awesome as well. So, at this
You're
time,
doing so well.
It's too extreme.
yeah.
Regenerate muscles as well.
So, yes, if you, sorry, say that again.
Because the rugby players,
I have the ice bath. It's basically really anti-inflammatory. So if you do it the night after a workout, you'll recover faster. So I actually do it. So again, I don't enjoy them. I do it at night, and I'll do it, and then I have a warm bath, and then I can't stay awake, and I have the best night's sleep ever. I don't know why that is, but so yeah.
So is it better to do the cold first rather than
Yeah.
cold after?
It doesn't matter.
Shower after a cold shower.
Sorry? No, well, no. When what I do at night is just I do the cold first. I think it'd be quite uncomfortable with the cold last. I'll be shivering in bed. So I do the cold first. I get into a warm bath, which feels amazing, and then as soon as my head hits the pillow, I just like that. So, but you know, this is my job, so I mess around with all this wacky stuff all the time.
Any other questions?
Do you have a date for your, come and talk to us about sleep?
It's in March, I
We
think.
do, yeah, we do. There's going to be an email actually going out very shortly about it. I think it's the second week of March. I think it's Monday the 7th, Tuesday the 8th. I will confirm, but you'll get an email very soon. But during any kind of topics you're interested in, if it's gut health, if it's sleep, we've already kind of got in the diary, but anything that you guys want to know more about, please let us know, because we're definitely trying to fill up the our evenings with any kind of more informative stuff you guys are interested
So this Monday 7th is a week from today.
in. Yes, I didn't realise that as I was saying it. March tomorrow. So yeah, it will be, and it'll be available on the app and things to book in, like today's was. But yeah, there's an email going out tomorrow confirming. So it'll be there. Thank you so
No,
much.
thank you. I hope you got some value out of it. Good job.
Have a look at the chairs.